Welcome back, Gulf Coast. So glad to have you in the house with us. It's good to be back with you this afternoon. We're, of course, broadcasting live, 1330 WEBY AM and 99.1 FM. And so glad that you're in the house with us. Listen, we've got a great show for you today. A lot to talk about, a lot of breaking news. And but my first guest is someone who I consider to be a dear friend. We've had her on the show before, Cheryl Chumley. And she is an award-winning journalist, a best-selling author of 2 books. She's got another one in the works, the ones that she has published. And many of you have probably read them. We've had her on this show before talking about them. One of them is called Police State. The other one is called The Devil in D.C. As I said, an award-winning journalist. She's made a lot of media appearances over the years, including Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups, and she's been on our show before. But you probably have also seen her on Fox News and other places as well. She writes for the Washington Times, and that's why I have her on today with us because of an article that she released just a couple of days ago that is very, very informative and thought-provoking, maybe even a little provocative, and I love it. Cheryl, thank you so much for joining us today.
Carl, it's great to be here. Love to chat. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, listen, excuse me for bumbling around. I just picked up some headphones that have a broken speaker. And so if you have any idea how aggravating that is. So I was looking for a point where I could swap headphones because I'm hearing this buzzing and I hear myself 18 times and it's driving me out of my mind. So please forgive me if I sound like I'm bumbling a little bit, but as soon as we get started, I'm going to swap headphones. But listen, this article that you posted, I read it. I immediately contacted you. I said, please, can you come on today and let's talk about it? Folks, the headlines of this article, it's posted at freedomfriday.carlgallups, facebook.com. Okay, facebook.com/freedomfriday.carlgallups. We post everything we talk about there. And this article in the Washington Times, the headline is Kavanaugh's Accuser and the Curious George Soros Links. So tell us about this. I mean, this is fascinating. I want our audience to know this because this smacks to me of Judge Roy Moore kind of stuff. And I think it's a setup for Donald Trump in 2020. I think they're floating test cases. I could be wrong, and you may disagree with me on that, but this is what I think. And now you have written on this connection to George Soros, which makes even more sense to me. Why don't you take it from there?
Sure. Well, yeah, this is a huge issue, and I think it's one that people need to know about as we go into the midterm elections because, as you know, the left is desperately seeking some issues in order to take down not just Trump, but all the Trump supporters, the candidates who support Trump in November. And what the latest fight is over, of course, is the Supreme Court and Brett Kavanaugh. And if you start looking at what's going on with this whole Kavanaugh, chaos, with the accuser coming forward and making claims about a sexual attack that happened back in high school that she's kept quiet about for 36 years, but suddenly in the last few months she felt the need to go public with a private letter to Senator Dianne Feinstein, which of course got leaked, curiously, just in the 11th hour as Kavanaugh's hearings were supposed to go forward. So that's the timing alone is suspicious, but seeing as we don't know what happened for sure, Kavanaugh's denied, but we still have the accuser out there and the left demanding that she be heard. So if you start looking past the headlines and start looking at some of the funding of some of the groups that have sprung up just this year with a stated mission to oppose Donald Trump judicial nominees and specifically to stop Brett Kavanaugh from being confirmed, there are some really curious links. And as you just pointed out, it ties into George Soros. And just as a quick one, if you look at George Soros's Open Society Policy Center, there's a funding disbursement there that goes through a group called the 1630 Fund.
Yes,
and this is a 501c4, so you can see where its money goes. But under the umbrella of the 1630 Fund, meaning funded by the 1630 Fund, is this new group that just sparked this year, in March or May of this year. It's called Demand Justice. Demand Justice has a mission entirely devoted to stopping Brett Kavanaugh. Demand Justice is a nonprofit entity that does not have to file IRS Form 990s to release the names of its donors because it's funded as a dark money organization under the 1630 fund. But if you look at some of the interesting links, the general counsel for Demand Justice, who just started there in March, is named Paige Herwig, Herwig. And coincidentally, she used to work for Senator Dianne Feinstein between January of 2017 and February of 2018. Feinstein, of course, is the one that's so tightly linked to this accuser who's come forward for Brett Kavanaugh. So that's just one personnel link. But if you start looking at the money flow,
yes,
you see that Demand Justice gets its money from 1630 Fund. 1630 Fund gets millions of dollars from the George Soros Open Society Policy Center. There are other links. I don't want to filibuster. If you have questions,
no, keep going. No, I just was going to ask. So the tie to Ford herself, or
the tie to Christine Blasey Ford.
Yes.
Oh well, the tie to her specifically is that her attorney. What's her attorney's name? Is Deborah Katz. Deborah Katz is vice chair of this organization called Project on Government Oversight. Project on Government Oversight, as I found when I looked through tax forms from, past years, in 2015, for instance, Project on Government Oversight got 30,000 gross Open Society Policy Center. So there's some interesting links there, and it's starting to appear as if, Ford, her accusations already flimsy, they're starting to take on the appearance of being funded by Democrats, and not just Democrats, by the far left George Soros type Democrats.
Yeah, and you've done an amazing job as always. You're a tremendous investigative reporter, and that's why you're an award-winning journalist. But you've done a tremendous job of connecting some dots and forming some links. You know the old cliche: follow the money. Follow the money. You want to know what's behind it? Generally speaking, follow the money. And there's such an incestuous relationship in the deep state. I mean, I guess it has to be, right? I mean, just by its very definition. But all of these folks are tied together. And now, lo and behold, we have this woman, Christine Blasey Ford, who's coming forward at 40 years after the fact with Kavanaugh to make these claims. And it's just been a circus of allegations but yet it's up to him to prove it, and she can't name the year it happened. She doesn't remember the location in which it took place. She didn't remember how they had gathered there that night. She didn't remember how she got home. She didn't tell anybody about the incident at the time, didn't report it, which, I can kind of get that. But all the other stuff stinks to high heaven to me. And now you have unveiled the fact that this stuff is all tied, at least the money trail, maybe not directly into her hands and pockets, but it looks like this thing is funded at the bottom level or at the top level by Soros himself.
And there probably aren't that many shocked people now to discover that George Soros' fingerprints, his funding fingerprints, are all along this. But what should be a big eye-opener to people is the link I just explained of Paige Herwig at Demand Justice. The last job she had was with Senator Dianne Feinstein's office, and Feinstein is the one who received the letter from Kavanaugh's accuser.
That was a coincidence, Cheryl. You know that.
That is one heck of a coincidence, and that's something that is really eye-opening and should be explored further.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, we're going to take a break in a minute, but it'll be another minute or two. But I want us to talk about, in relation to all of this, though, listen, when it was finally exposed that Blasey Ford, she couldn't remember all of these what I consider to be key facts. Look, I was a law enforcement officer years ago. Spent almost 11 years in law enforcement, in 2 different sheriff's offices under 3 different sheriffs. One of them I did a lot of my own criminal investigations and assisted the other criminal investigators. I've been involved in investigating these kinds of things, and accusations. And when someone says that they had a sexual assault that traumatized them, and I don't care how long ago, I mean, I can get it if you don't remember the exact date, but she doesn't even remember the year. She has nothing to tie it to. She doesn't even remember the exact location where it happened. I find that unbelievable. She doesn't know how they got there that night. She doesn't know how she got home. I want us to talk about that, because as soon as these facts were exposed, Cheryl, along comes the mainstream media dragging out psychologists and psychiatrists one after the other saying, sometimes when people are traumatized, they just don't remember the key facts. Really? Then how do we ever solve any crime?
I certainly would like to talk about that more with you.
Okay, good deal. And listen, as a cop, I have dealt with sexual assault and rape cases. As a pastor for 30-something years, 33 years in one church, one community, I have been involved in sexual assault situations in ministry and helping people. And some of them go way back. I help in ministering to people who it comes up later on in their life. I get that. I know this stuff is real. And if Kavanaugh did sexually assault somebody and there were charges and he raped somebody, I mean, that needs to be dealt with. But I do know this. When something that traumatic happens, people remember the key details. They may not know the exact date, but they know where they were. They know pretty much who was there. They know how they got there, why they were there, and they know how they got home, because they live it over and over and over again, Cheryl.
Well, I have some experience to add to that as well. I was a CASA, court-appointed special advocate for 4 years, and as part of that, I dealt with sexual harassment, sexual abuse in children. And, I've been trained in how post-traumatic stress disorder, all those abuse things play out in a person's life. And I have to say there are some questions with what Ford is saying happened to her.
Yes, yeah, and I want to get your expertise on that, and it may differ from what I just said, and that's fine. Of course, we're good friends. I mean, I want you to speak your mind, so we'll do that. But let's go ahead and take this break, and when we come back, I want to continue to talk about this whole scenario, because I think we're going to see some explosive things happen with it just in the next few days. Folks, you're listening. 1330 WEBY, 99.1 FM, and 1330 AM. Freedom Friday, Gulf Coast Talk Radio. Cheryl Chumley's my guest today. We'll be right back after this brief timeout. Give us 2 minutes, and we'll be right back in your house. All right, welcome back, folks. My guest this afternoon is Cheryl Chumley, and as I introduced her at the opening at the top of the hour, she's written 2 best-selling books, Police State and The Devil in D.C. She's got another one coming out. She's an award-winning journalist. She's been all over media, and including Fox, and she writes for the Washington Times. She's just written this explosive piece that was out just a few days ago that ties what's happening with Brett Kavanaugh's accuser, Christine Blasey Ford, and makes the ties to George Soros. And I love the headline, Kavanaugh's accuser and the curious George Soros links. That's great. But Cheryl, listen, that's a great title, by the way. Did you come up with that title, or your editors did that? Right. And Curious George. Yeah, it's great. That's great. But listen, so we're talking about, and you and I were talking offline. You know my heart is right in this, and I certainly know yours is. I mean, we were talking offline about the fact that listen, if something truly like this did happen to this woman, and if it was Brett Kavanaugh, I mean, I want to know, but there's so many questions here, and the fact that she's unable to name the year it happened, she doesn't remember the exact location it happened, she doesn't know how they all gathered at that location, she doesn't remember how she got home, she didn't tell anyone of the incident at the time, didn't file any police reports, and that does happen with sexual assault. I get that part, but all the other stuff and more, it's just, and now the Soros links to all of this, and our understanding of the deep state and the left's hatred for Donald Trump, their hatred for Brett Kavanaugh. I think 2 + 2 is equaling 4 here. What do you think about all of that, Cheryl? And what do you think about this thing about not being able to remember, since you had some experience in dealing with sex crimes?
Well, that and Kavanaugh's impeccable record, if he were truly this sexual predator, this sexual attacker, it seems to me that there would have been some other incidents in his life, some other women who would come forward to point out similar tales and so forth, but there hasn't been. Yeah. And when you look at all the timing of all this, and the Democrats' just all-out attacks to take down all things Trump and stop the Supreme Court nomination from going forward, it's just, it doesn't meet the smell test. And as you mentioned, I have had a little bit of experience dealing with victims of sexual abuse. I was a CASA for 4 years, and what CASAs do, court-appointed special advocates, is they work for the judge to help judges make the difficult decision of where children in abuse cases should be placed. Should they go back in the homes with their parents, with their caretakers, or should they be put up for adoption, and so forth. So I've had cases where I've either been directly or indirectly involved with children and adults who are sexually abused. And I can tell you that though rare, there are instances where the post-traumatic stress disorder that comes from some sexual abuse cases leads to memory failures,
sure,
where people just bury the memories, where things are so traumatic, and the things that happen to them at a young age they're not able to process. So they forget these things happen. It sounds very difficult to believe, but a suppressed memory is no different from, what did you have for dinner 3 years ago? Right. Well, you don't remember. Now, you could probably follow down some trails and dig deep and so forth and get that memory. But the fact is, it's suppressed at this point. You have to find that trail. That's the same thing with what happens to some of the most traumatic cases of sexual abuse. And as I said, it is rare, but it does happen. And with this woman, though, what she's describing, if we're to believe what Ford has put forth, we're supposed to believe that she was so traumatized by what happened at this party that she either suppressed the memory for so long and forgot key details because it so traumatized her, or she just outright ignored it because she didn't feel that she would be believed for 36 years, and something has changed and suddenly she feels as if she could be believed. And either scenario, just it doesn't hold up when you look at all the other factors that have played into this. And the fact that she is reluctant to come forward and give proof, give evidence, give any type of supporting statements or facts, that just raises even more question marks in my mind. Yeah,
me too. And there's supposedly, it was a party, and there were other people there, and she's given different accounts on how many people were there and who was there. And
people were drunk, and
maybe she was drunk. I mean, that's not an excuse for somebody to attack her, but I'm just saying, I have a real hard time in dealing with the investigate. Listen, I've been involved directly in sexual abuse investigations in law enforcement. In fact, I'm thinking of a rape case in particular that I actually solved, and the guy went to prison for forever. So I've been involved at that level. And I'm telling you, it really stinks to me that a grown woman that this happened to when she was in high school, so she wasn't a child, she wasn't 3 or 4 or 5, 6, 7 years old, and she doesn't know where it happened. Yet it was a party, and she doesn't know how she got home or how she got to the party or anything. I'm just having a hard time with that, Cheryl.
Yeah, and sexual abuse, sexual attack is no joke, and I really don't think when women make accusations that they should have to go through the litany of questions of, well, what were you wearing?
Yes.
How many sexual partners have you had in your life? And they be put in the spot of having to defend themselves.
Yes.
But if you make an accusation like this, you need to have some sort of backing or proof or evidence, or be willing to put yourself out there for some harsh questioning and perhaps even criticisms.
Yes, you're making an accusation against a sitting federal judge who might be a Supreme Court justice for life in front of the world on television cameras. You know, she hasn't been before a camera yet, but the confirmation hearings are. And so she makes this, she just drops this bombshell. But yet she's, trying to manipulate the whole system of, well, okay, I'll come talk about it. Well, I'm not going to talk about it. Well, I'll talk about it with conditions. Well, now I've changed the conditions. Well, when did this happen? Well, I don't remember. Well, where did it happen? Well, I can't remember that either. Well, who was there? Well, I don't really remember. Well, how'd you get there? I don't remember that. How'd you get home? I don't remember. But it's true. And then we find out George Soros is linked to it. I mean, if it walks like a duck, Cheryl.
Well, I just wrote a piece today that said at this point in time, it's Brett Kavanaugh who appears the victim, not Christine Ford.
Thank you. Cheryl, we love you. We love your writing. Thank you for being on the show today. I'm hearing the music. I love it when you're on. You got to come on more often.
Anytime, Carl. Love chatting with you.
Okay. Thanks, Cheryl Chumley. We'll have you back very, very soon. God bless you.
All right.
American Survival Wholesale is proud to sponsor this ministry and their efforts to shed light on the issues that face our nation. As a veteran and Christian-owned and operated company, we support the freedom to express these Christian principles. We all understand the importance of being prepared. After witnessing the devastation of Hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and the wildfires that affected so many, please support this ministry by clicking on the link below and check out the amazing alt media package for our listeners. Plus, if you use the promo code PNN Radio, that's PNN Radio, you will receive free shipping, a savings of up to $200. Just click on the link below, but please do it today. Your support means so much to this channel.